And now a lot of contact centers are kind of in this catch-up mode. How do I get there?
People have come to expect very little of automated voice technologies. And actually, by and large, many people expect very little from contact centers altogether. We found that it's beneficial to just pick up the call with a simple, hey, how can I help? You let them talk and then you ease them into the fact that it's automated. If they ask, you complain, you don't try to fake it. But you don't draw attention to it immediately. And the beauty of Agentic AI and everything that's been built in the past 6 months is you don't have to specify how it works. So I think everyone's just really excited about the future where there's this unlock both from like a capability of, say, human communication, but also of the work being done in the back end. So this traditional starting point for like IVR and automation is you prioritized OpEx reduction over your CSAT score. Hence, you deployed whatever you deployed. Your number of agents went down from 14,000 to 9,000. You saved a lot of money. You're the hero.
Welcome to the Tech Transformed podcast, where we have a weekly conversation with people impacting the enterprise tech landscape. My name is Jon Arnold. I'm the principal analyst at J Arnold Associates, and I operate an independent technology practice as an analyst, and I follow communications technologies quite closely. And this topic today is quite very much in my wheelhouse of expertise, as it obviously is for our guest today. So for this episode, I'm speaking with Nikola Mrksic, CEO and co-founder of PolyAI, about artificial intelligence and its transformative role in the contact center. We will also talk about the rise of Agentic AI and its role in revolutionizing contact center ops and customer experiences. Okay, so Nikola, welcome to our podcast today. Great to be with you virtually.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, great. And the magic of video makes it feel like we're almost in the room together, but we will persevere in our respective spots and let's get into some of the topics, Nikola. So let's kind of start with AI because everything seems to be about AI these days. So it continues as the dominant force shaping tech, which I think we all know. And things are moving faster than ever before. So there are lots of valid use cases across the enterprise, but contact center really has long been one of the best. So I want to talk about why that is the case, as well as some of the leading benefits of AI. So let's go there, and then we'll move on to talk a little bit about specifically adoption trends for our listeners out there. So why don't we get into that first? Why is the contact center a great use case for AI?
Yeah, well, look, I think that most enterprise contact centers have a large volume of relatively repetitive tasks happening at huge scale, right? Whether it's because it's just service where people are calling and, I don't know, making reservations or asking questions about their bills or making their monthly mortgage payment, all the way to kind of like standard failure demand, which is, hey, I've been overcharged. What do I do in this case or in that case? So wherever there is like, a high number of reps, you're able to learn and adapt AI in order to kind of create workflows that are then performed by AI agents instead of by humans. And I think that for a long time, technology around the contact center has been a bit stale and underinvested in relative to today, where it's been very kind of like clearly identified as one of the key growth areas for where AI will make the biggest difference. So you see everyone from hyperscalers to traditional contact center companies to BPOs making huge investments there because they're keen to own a bigger market share of that future.
Okay, so along those lines, how would you characterize some of the key benefits in the contact center for using AI?
Yeah, well, look, we have clients that have automated 90% of their tasks with voice AI agents, right? So at that point, the first level is you get a contact center that picks up any time of day or night, no matter if 1,000 or 10,000 people call all at once, right? That's not something that you can do with humans. So those surge demand, seasonality, and just in general, contact centers that don't have enough staff to deal with the demand are now able to, right? So that's the first and exciting thing. I think many start from cost cutting as the primary high level explanation for what's going on, but we've not found that to be the case. It's one of the kind of like corollaries, right? It's not where people start because they're not doing customer service well enough. They're not picking up the phone fast enough. They're not doing it because a CFO in a dark corner of the company said, "Here's a way for me to fire 2,000 people." It's more often the case that strict budgeting made companies reduce the number of agents, or they just didn't increase salaries. And over time, it became a more difficult labor environment, especially post COVID, where customer experience leaders find themselves without enough staff to do the job they want to do. And then they resort to technology, which kind of like makes up for that lost labor supply that they've probably already been denied, right? Then at that point, they're doing more for less, and this AI hive mind is able to deal with the vast majority of what a tier one customer service rep does. That then improves the attrition in the contact center because the people there become knowledge workers. They're doing a lot more work around supervising not just tier one human agents, but thinking about what the right thing to do is in a certain situation, and then making the AI or the humans still doing some tasks do a better job, right? At that point, you really see a transformation of the contact center into a command center where that bi-directional flow of information starts to flow rather than the primary work of managers in the contact center being are Jon and Nikola answering questions in a way that is prescribed. And we start looking at, hey, we seem to be answering that question in this way. Is that really what we're after? And then there are more interesting things like, let's say you're a utility company and the number of calls about people being charged too much in Palo Alto grows tenfold in a day. Like the business should know because sure, like you can do your best to tell people if you feel like you've been charged too much, submit this form online and we'll deal with it. But if you deal with the underlying cause, then maybe you don't get 300 times as many people submitting that form and overwhelming a different part of your business. So you kind of like raising your hand at the contact center leader and saying, hey, yes, over the past 2 days, we're struggling to meet demand. But here's why we have that extra demand. At that point, the contact center stops being this bottomless pit that you throw money in and you seemingly get nothing back because you have to do customer service. You have to pick up the phone call. People talk about turning the contact center into a revenue center and all of that. But the first step is really like tell the business what's going on because in a different part of the company you're paying marketeers a lot of money. You're probably hiring third parties to go and survey your customers and ask them about this or that, and at the same time you might have 1,000 people speaking with your customers every day and surfacing absolutely no insight. So I think with AI we're finally getting the chance to make that whole analytical stream come alive, in addition to providing better service, more reliable service, more consistent service with AI agents as the kind of like front line of that fighting force you keep in the contact center.
You describe that as a fighting force. They're,
I'm
they're
Serbian. It comes with the territory.
okay. Defend the brand, defend the company, which is absolutely true. Uh,
Yeah.
I just want to pick up a bit on what you said earlier about how this translates into better work environment for the agents, right? So
Yeah.
less attrition, they perform at a higher level for a longer period of time. And
Yeah.
for listeners out there who are considering, making an investment in AI, why would I do it? Where should I use it? I think it's important to pick up on this kind of like ripple effect that comes when you have those operational efficiencies and gains you get from automating all those, as you say, routine inquiries. Yeah, the agent's job is easier. They get to focus on solving real problems, not ridiculous ones. And then you translate that to the customer, the impact on the other side of the line, the CX, or as we call it, customer experience gets better. And that translates into things that the upper tiers of management care about, CSAT scores,
Yeah.
NPS scores, things that are tangible benefits and validations that this is making things better on both sides for customers and operationally. So that said, I mean, we could talk all day long about how AI could be a kind of a silver bullet for contact centers, but I think you mentioned earlier about, underinvesting in technologies. That's a real problem because the pace of change with technology has been adopted more effectively, I think, by customers than the contact centers. So you have higher expectations today from customers. And now a lot of contact centers are kind of in this catch up mode. How do I get there? So I want to talk a little bit because you're a more technical guy than me, Nicola. Let's talk a little bit about the complex nature of AI technologies in terms of, a bit of a barrier to adoption, right? So what would some of those barriers be, and how do you, at PolyAI, but for vendors in general, to help overcome those barriers?
Yeah. So there are a few different ways we can talk about these. One is like the consumer level, right? If you put a really lifelike voice assistant in front of your customers and you pick up the phone and you say, hey, I'm a digital host or whatever. I'm an automated customer service rep. I'm a voice agent. Like, how do people react, right? And you're right. People use more technology than ever, and their expectations of technology are higher than ever. This area is an exception. People have come to expect very little of automated voice technologies. And actually, by and large, many people expect very little from contact centers altogether, right? They're used to being passed around five different agent groups, trying to find an answer, oftentimes just giving up, right? And going, I'm not going to recoup that $50 that I was overcharged. I better not waste my time. And then they go around and it's just part of like the sourness towards the brand that they feel afterwards, right? Or they do and they persevere and then they have a horror story of 7 hours on the phone waiting for an agent in this skill group only to realize that they should have been speaking with someone else altogether, like in a different part of the company. So people, when they hear something automated, especially in America where there's been the most of kind of like what we call tier one IVR, kind of like the kind of like first generation of it, they just react very badly. They don't expect it will work. They start screaming operator very often. And we found that it's beneficial to just pick up the call with a simple, hey, how can I help? You let them talk and then you ease them into the fact that it's automated. If they ask, you complain. You don't try to fake it, right? But you don't draw attention to it immediately. That is really helpful because when they see it working, like we'll have someone say something that's 30, 40 words as an explanation, and the answer might take half a second longer than a human would, right? And you're thinking, is it AI or not? But then it starts talking. We're one of the pioneers and one of the emerging leaders in the space of kind of like voice automation for customer service. So UX for us has been like that silver bullet to adoption where, it'll have a regional accent. It may sound Texan. It may be in the UK, someone from like Newcastle, right? The voice is very regional, distinct accent where you're like, well, this probably is not AI, right? So you're left doubting. You continue talking, and then you realize it is. But by that point, you're actually just amazed because that knowledge that AI is coming, people wait to see it in their daily life. And you don't really see a lot of it just yet. We could be seeing a hell of a lot more of it, right? Like there's not enough of it everywhere you look. We're not growing 10% annually in GDP because AI is transforming everything. We know it's there. We know we have what is already super intelligence, but it's not made such a difference. But then when people experience it and they're like consumer interaction, we get people who are just like, oh my God, I can't believe this is automated. This is like the best interaction I've ever heard. And our team loves that because hearing that is the very opposite thing of like the traditional attitude to this. That's someone whose mind we've changed, right? And it's going to take us deploying this at a greater scale for that to become the norm. So right now we're delighting people by doing better.
Yeah, and I think the exciting part here too, for better or worse, the bar for self-service has been so low for so long with legacy technology, particularly IVR, right? I mean, that's the old school DTMF touchtone based form of query response, very stilted, one-way asynchronous kind of thing, back and forth. Whereas this is like, wow, as you say, when you get that wow, those adoption barriers, I think, start to fall away pretty quickly because
Yeah.
I think they see for themselves, oh, this is a whole other level of capability. Then it becomes a strategic issue. We just have to have this.
And it's cool, right? Like they talk to it and it's like a cool experience, right? And at that point, you're like, that brand invested heavily to do a better job for me. So if it worked or
Exactly.
not, the other side of it is if it's not working, like don't keep people in a self-service labyrinth. Hand off. Be like, hey, I seem to be struggling. I'm really sorry. I'm going to hand you off to one of my human colleagues. That's okay. Like, that you get passed around different skill groups in a contact center all the time. You're used to it. So as long as you're not forced to endure an interaction that's not working out for you, like you'll give it another shot later. And that's all we can ask for.
Yeah, and I like how you brought that up about the wow factor with consumers, because that is a real thing that if they have always expected low, poor service before, like say you're a bank or an airline, now all of a sudden you get a great experience. You say, "Oh, wait a minute, these guys are okay. They're playing my song. They're doing what I would be doing." And now all of a sudden your brand loyalty could change quickly. And that's the payoff right there. End of discussion. Let's move on a little bit to where we're at, like right this minute, and that is agentic AI. I've been calling this as one of the trends for 2025, and I'm not being proven wrong yet. Everything I'm seeing from the vendors is it's really where they're all going. And for those listening today who aren't really familiar with what we're talking about, let's frame this a little bit for them and say, well, what do we mean by agentic and why is it such a big deal?
Yeah. I mean, when you think of agentic AI, it's really like thinking of artificial intelligence that can kind of like do work on your behalf. It can do work on your behalf asynchronously, and you can kind of like join up these different like actions that make for a much more complicated workflow that gets something done for you, right? So let's say, well, let's dream a little, right? You turn around to your consumer voice assistant and you go, I don't know, like, Alexa, I've been overcharged by my utility company. Can you call and figure out why? So your voice assistant calls the contact center. Maybe it's answered by a different voice assistant. They capture the requirements, your address, the details of which month, they make sure that it's a valid query. They ask some security questions. It might be like, I don't know, when you moved in or how long you've been a customer. God knows, right? Depends on the company. You do all that. Maybe they don't know one of it. Maybe your assistant comes back to you. He's like, hey, John, when did you move in? They're asking, I don't know. You go like, oh, October 2010. Cool. Okay. Goes back to the phone. It's October 2010. You didn't have to call again. They didn't have to call again. It didn't have to call again because it was there on the line waiting to get something from you. You supplied that piece of information. That thing went, okay, I'm going to figure this out. Leave it with me. Stay on the line. It can stay on the line. It's free. It's technology, right? It's not your time being wasted. It goes away and starts working on the back end processes. It starts scouring these documents. It's looking at the announcements. It's thinking. It's processing, right? And it's like, oh, notice to all, I don't know where you live. Let's say you lived in Palo Alto. Like, notice to all residents of Palo Alto, like, the bill in the month of February will be higher because we're accounting for works done on blah, blah, blah. Like, you cross-reference, you see it, you go like, one reason for that is this. Your agent goes, okay, that's a 20% increase. Hopefully it has history, right? So you can like look at your past things. They both can and figure out that your bill is actually 10 times higher. So something's definitely wrong. And then, there's a whole myriad of these kinds of use cases everywhere where you hope that you can kind of like build these chains of both like front office, well, both like work done on your behalf, front office support facing it, and then the back office workflow where you might have heard back in 5 days. It should now be done, if not instantly, in a few minutes, right? And that the work of a lot of those kind of like people working in the back end can be automated because now you have technology that can like look at a computer screen, click around, read things, move around, do it a lot faster than a human, input it a lot faster than a human, right? So it stops being this need for, oh, let's categorize our caller types and problems into like how frequently they happen, then let's build a better billing system. You have a billing system already. When they call and you figure out the problem, there is a way to do it. So if you can have AI doing the work of those agents, hence agentic, right? Then you can just like hopefully latch onto the existing infrastructure and use it to create what is effectively an API, right? So call of technology to a system and a query that gets a result back. And the beauty of agentic AI and everything that's been built in the past 6 months is you don't have to specify how it works. You don't have to, in theory, that's the promise. It works in some places, doesn't yet work in others. In many cases, it's still too slow. In many cases, it's still too expensive. But Moore's law is on our side and things have never moved faster. So I think everyone's just really excited about the future where there's this unlock both from like a capability of, say, human communication, but also of the work being done in the back end.
Yeah. And the translation, I think, for the contact center leaders is the idea that you could have not just this kind of typical self-service experience where you're following a set of predefined options and menu items that gets a little bit of work done. Now you can actually have that, whatever you want to call it, agent assist, take a whole inquiry end to end rather than handing it off midway to an agent. So it can, in other words, get do a higher percentage of the work. Whereas when before it may only be able to do the first like 10% of the inquiry. So now if it's going closer to like 90% of the inquiry, again, live agent workload is lightened up quite a bit. And more importantly, the agentic AI experience, like you say, if it proves to be good and intuitive and the customer stays on the line with it, it must be doing something right. That's kind of validating, I think, the use case of AI to say, hey, not just about updating my billing address. This is open-ended stuff. It's unstructured data. It's things that were not ever in the realm of self-service before. So now you can look at self-service as a bigger part of your overall solution to improving customer service. And that kind of takes us to another kind of bigger trend we see in contact center, and that's this shift away from what we've always called as customer service to what we now talk about as customer experience or CX. Let's talk that through a little bit. How would you kind of articulate the difference between customer service and CX and why it's important?
Well, I mean, like for us for a long time, that's been one of the main filters of like which companies do we work with, right? So we're like a top provider and we're a premium provider. We're the most expensive one. And we're well known for working with brands that really care about their customer service. So this traditional starting point for like IVR and automation is you prioritized OpEx reduction over your CSAT score. Hence, you deployed whatever you deployed. Your number of agents went down from 14,000 to 9,000. You saved a lot of money. You're the hero. There are companies like that. There always will be companies like that, right? But most companies are not like this, right? To a different extent. Because there is some very abstract equation that tells you what the change of 0.3, 0.6 in your CSAT score does to your churn, does to your lifetime value of customers, to your your ability to make money, right? The way it like feeds back with some lag into your bottom line and your top line, right? Revenue mostly. So for companies that care about this, there is a CX officer, and they're usually like the person above the contact center. And their job is to report to the board about NPS and CSAT scores and other SLAs, so service level agreements, towards the customer, right? So if I call, do you pick up my phone within a minute? If I call, is your first call resolution at least, I don't know, 80%. So that means that 80% of the people, when done with that phone call, are done with their problem. The problem has been fixed. That metric, more than any other, is probably the holy grail of customer service, where the higher it is, it really correlates with satisfaction, with all other kind of like metrics that you would care about as a business. So with CX, like you really kind of then, when you deploy automation, you look at things that will get you a certain amount of maybe like efficiency or like OpEx reductions, or, they will allow you to do more with less. But where we've really had success is that chief customer experience officer looks and says, with the budget we have, we're not doing enough for our customers. We're not picking up fast enough. We're not doing this and that fast enough. If we deployed AI and dealt with these 40% of calls initially, that means that we stop leaving people waiting for 7 minutes, and instead the average waiting time goes down to 30 seconds. That's amazing. At that point, they're already like the blood pressure drops, right? I can tell you with many of our large deployments for people, and especially when we were a smaller company, someone's betting their career on like these like Cambridge spin out, a bunch of like academics trying to like build this like AI that speaks. Now it's like pretty commonplace. And I think, we have a target on our back in that 40% of like Y Combinator companies are trying to build what we've built, which is exciting. But in reality, even 3 years ago, this was complete science fiction. So someone was, going up to their boss, to the the customer experience officer was getting other executives to agree, and they're going to roll this out, and let's see if the customers hate it or not, or how it works. And there's that moment where you achieve the first portion of what you're going to achieve, where they just go like, wow, like I feel like I have superpowers. So that we've had before, like the whole explosion of interest that you see today. Now there's like a reversal where you're almost an idiot if you're not doing it. It's not clear to people what exactly you should be doing, right? There's a lot of posturing, and this is really a cloud 2.0 moment, except when cloud first came about, I think it was clear to people who were really looking at it that it's going to be transformational. But for many, they were like, "Ah, come on, what? To not have on-prem? Really?" My security guy said, "No, I'm done." Right? And then the companies that didn't start a cloud transformation in time pay for it heavily in years to come because they're not ready to adopt a whole set of other technologies that their top competitor has adopted because the base has been upgraded and, effectively the operating system they run on is a lot better, right? So with Gen AI, the level of cacophony is huge, right? So for a lot of these stakeholders, they're really afraid of missing the next cloud moment. So they're investing. But you also see from Gartner, from many of those reports, that like the vast majority of these initiatives fail. And that actually is a good thing. I don't know why it's looked at as like, oh my God, it fails. Of course it fails. It's vastly new. And, I think as a society, we've embarked upon doing a lot of experimentation. The good news is 10% of it is like really succeeding and having a transformational impact. So compared to cloud, where it was just like a good thing to do and it like was the thing you had to do, here you kind of have to figure out what it means for your business and where it has the maximum impact. And we're back to good old capitalism. If you do the right thing before your competitors, you get to take them for a ride. And if they do and you don't, then that'll suck for you.
Yep. There's a lot there we could go on for all day here, Nikola. I'll just touch on one thing you mentioned, and that's the magic word for me is transformative. And I think for anyone out there in the audience who's either thinking about it or on the fence with these things, the big deal here is all of these trends we've touched on today, AI, cloud. We haven't even talked about things like mobility, but these technologies are all moving faster than ever before, and they're having a bigger impact than ever before. And like you say, if you wait too long to go to the cloud, you're going to miss it with AI. It will end badly. That's for sure. So the idea of this customer experience is tied to this because it means that customer satisfaction is driven by more things than just what happens in the contact center. So we now have to draw on data from across the organization with all these other touch points that come from maybe marketing or sales or invoicing or shipping. So we have this kind of mix of sources that really only AI has the kind of horsepower to draw from. So you can't tap all of these data inputs to get that bigger picture view of the customer without AI. And that's what makes this transformational thing so important. So as we come to a close, Nikola, just to set up our last topic here. So both business leaders and CX leaders know the contact centers need to modernize. I think that's pretty clear for everybody. But to succeed, they're going to have to get better at adopting new technologies like AI. And we've kind of touched on that a little bit so far. But from your perspective here, what advice can you share both for business leaders and CX leaders? Because they really are two different types of functions within the organization. How can vendors like PolyAI help them get there faster?
Yeah. So I think there is, you know, in every space, like two kinds of software. One that is sold like to the CIO and that IT kind of like procures and buys and leads with, and that kind of like that is more like kind of like business oriented and kind of like outcome oriented first, right? I think for a lot of companies right now, especially large ones, we talked about the cloud moment, they're really afraid of getting it wrong. And because of that, they're defaulting to buying IBM. Not IBM per se, but the likes of like Google, right? Who are like the safe option for AI. And that really means that they're sold these mega large consulting projects with a bunch of SIs and consultants and internal IT teams. And it's just like it goes there to die because you can't make those big decisions dynamically for technology that's changing that quickly,
Right.
right? So we've had tremendous success. I think of all of our competitors, we are the one that's like tier one logos. Think of like the likes of FedEx, PG&E, Marriott, Caesars, Unicredit, right? So including like large European regulated banks. Every single time that we've been successful, it's been because the business leader, and in this case, the CX leader, was empowered to run a probing attack, to go back to the military analogies, to try something small, see if it works, and then double down and double down and double down, right? I think for a lot of companies right now, they're thinking of building their own things. And listen, I've been at this long enough that I have a huge appreciation for why like a Walmart behaves the way they do. and companies like that. They're huge. They are unbelievably large companies. And the cost of owning something long term and doing it right, that's worth more than moving fast because their businesses are so enduring and so structurally dominant in what they do that it's okay to not move fast. I think those guys, they have a very clear playbook of what they're going to do. Anything I say won't change the way they behave. But I think for many other enterprises, they're being sold to by what seems like the safe option. And I think everyone can see from like Google being like the absolute number one in AI to kind of like being the laughing stock after OpenAI did what they did, and the DeepSeek upsets OpenAI, and then OpenAI is back with these things and those things. Innovation comes, every company at the end of the day defaults to its DNA and the one thing that it's really good at, right? So unless you're an AI company, you really shouldn't be trying to solve a new problem on your own. Maybe you should like work on upskilling your teams and kind of like building those capabilities so that you can assess whether you're doing the right thing or not. But I think we see a lot of companies, mostly working with cloud providers, going and just trying to build this on their own and in partnership with SIs. And they mount these huge, huge initiatives where in the end they have nothing to show. And I think I don't really have an analogy for the cloud other than maybe like, we're not going to do that. We're going to build our own cloud-like infrastructure on our own. That's not a good idea. The cloud vendors got there in the end. You know, they offer private cloud offerings where you get your own. So you get all the benefits of the cloud with all the benefits of private network that is only your own and not anyone else's, right? So unless you are an AI company and this is like your core area of focus, you shouldn't be setting aside tens of millions to do this fully on your own because it's changing so fast that by the time you build something, it will be outdated. You just as the company do not have the agility to mobilize and move fast enough to stay on top. And what that means in practice is you should be working with a lot of startups, right? And with other companies, right? And you should just experiment in a very ruthless way. Work with 10 companies, see who performs the best. And you'll see that many of them are just overpromising, right? And I think there, the partnership between the CIO and the business leader in whatever area it is, in our case, it would be the chief customer experience officer or the COO or whoever's in charge of and has the remit over these service levels, will solve starting from the problem. Not because you're going to look like a schmuck if you don't do Gen AI the way you would have if you didn't do cloud. Start by solving the problem. And you're more likely to get it right with this new technology and to be the hero than by just saying, going all imperial and saying, we're going to be like the best bank or the best telco at generative AI. That's just the wrong approach. They will take your money. You will commit a lot of money to a Google or someone like that, and you'll have nothing to show in the end. We've seen it play out so many times.
Well said. And the military analogies are pretty apt here for sure. Just to end off, I just want to amplify two of those points. One being that the risk factor is just too high to try to build it yourself. And simply, there's just no, as you say, other than the Walmarts of the world, the big battleships, these things just change too fast. There's no competitive advantage anymore to owning technology that takes a long time to build. It's
Well,
just
look,
not.
and to be the devil's advocate, right? Like maybe a Walmart one day gets disrupted by someone who uses their technology much faster, right? There are very few companies of a Walmart scale that can survive on Amazon coming in. And think of what a Walmart could have been had they adopted faster. But their approach of like, let's see it play out and then build like a systemic solution at lowest cost with a lot of like our own IT in it. That's okay. It's a valid approach. You run some risk of it. But for everyone else, I think you really just need to invest with like enough scarcity to kind of like just see things play out. But like invest with the time scale in mind. There will be your competitors that implement a solution from a company like PolyAI, maybe not necessarily us, who will see a superhuman level of customer experience. And if that's important, and it is for most companies to a different extent, they will start outperforming you, right? Like if you're a bank or a telco, as a kind of same set of people year on year, and they bank with a bank or two. They have a phone number or two, probably one, right? And it's kind of like a zero-sum game, right? Where it's like they will either stay your customers or you'll be so great that by word of mouth, others who are unhappy with someone else will move to you. So I think it matters. And I think that you should look at like, what can I do this year? Not like, how can I budget for next year to start building a team so that in the year after. And by the time you build a team to do something, maybe the next generation of LLMs reduces it to a prompt. And all you will have done is a science experiment. And it would be like you and I deciding that at this stage in our lives, we're going to be like tennis professionals. We're probably not going to get very far, right? We're probably going to get better at tennis. We might get injured, but we're sure as hell won't be Novak Djokovic in 3 years from now.
For sure. And that takes me to the second thing I want to touch on that you said. That's the idea about fail fast. That I'm with you on that one. So folks, yeah, don't think big picture. Yeah, try a few different potential partners, because the thing with this type of technology is you're going to find out pretty quickly if you're going to get that result. And this isn't a game of getting incremental changes. You're not trying to just answer the phone 2 seconds faster. This is about kind of rethinking what's possible, what customer service can look like for your customers and your operations. And so then few of these experiments, like you say, the winners, you'll find out quickly. And those are the ones you start going on. You'll get those small results, and that builds your trust in AI, the whole kind of playbook that follows once you are confident to run with that.
For sure, right? Because like, unless you're confident that it must be fully owned by your IT team and run on like, I don't know, Google Cloud, unless you have that as an axiom of life, if this stuff is as transformational as we all claim, then, much like A/B testing, like you need A/B testing when you've pretty much maxed out performance, right? And then you're like, okay, plus 2%, plus 3%, let's do that. Then let's change another variable, right? If it's a 10x difference, you will know. You won't even need evaluation. It'll just be clear immediately that this works. And then you're going to go like pedal to the metal, like you're going to increase your investments, because at that point, you won't need a quantum physicist to compute the ROI. It will be obvious to anyone, right? And that's the kind of outcomes we see with our customers, right? And it's not the right solution for every situation. Not every environment has the things needed for this to be transformational. But we tend to know pretty fast. I mean, our average time to go live from kind of like people signing on to like them being live is about 6 weeks. And at that point, they either see that it's transformational or it's not. And for the most part, it is. But, getting over the line can be difficult.
Very good. Okay, that's going to take us to time here today. So thank you very much, Nikola, for joining us today. And of course, I appreciate your coming on and being very candid with us. And that's the way we like it here. So thank you, everyone out there, for listening with us here. And we hope you took a lot away from today's podcast. So thank you all so much, Nikola, for joining us today. And I appreciate your coming on. Now, also a big thank you to everyone out there listening to us today. And we hope you took a lot away from today's podcast. And for further information on what we've been talking about, please head over to www.poly.ai. We'll be back next week with another episode in our podcast series. Until then, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all the major platforms and follow the conversation on our socials at EM360Tech on X and on LinkedIn. And for more great daily content, head over to the website, em360tech.com. Thank you.